Teach Me Grappling. What's up, guys? Brian Peterson here. And the subject of this video, Chael Sonnen, he made a video about a year ago talking about BJJ and wrestling. I guess somebody asked him a question over if one guy wrestled every day for 10 years and another athlete did Jiu-Jitsu every day for 10 years. In other words, their training is equal in each of the disciplines. If these guys were to go at it, who would win? And Chael Sonnen basically revealed his opinion that the Jiu-Jitsu guy was the easy pick. And it wasn't that long ago. I was on a Facebook page that I'm a part of, and the discussion about that video came up. It was brought up, and basically saying, Chael Sonnen is wrong. That wrestling has proven time and time again that it's done better than Jiu-Jitsu. And I just wanted to say, so is Chael Sonnen wrong? And I really want to give my opinion. I don't think he's wrong at all. Chael Sonnen was a very good wrestler, much better wrestler than me as far as accolades go. But I also have wrestled for 27 years of my life. And he's totally correct. And a lot of people may not agree, and they may not even understand. And I would say the majority of the time that people don't understand this, it's mostly because they're not wrestlers. It's so interesting how non-wrestlers will commonly talk about how good wrestlers are. And they tell everyone how good wrestlers are, basically based on the performance of MMA fighters in the UFC winning world titles. And that's a different discussion. And so I'm basically going to say what Chael Sonnen said, but I want to repeat it, and maybe I'll say a few things that are different. He brought up Dan Severn versus Royce Gracie as the first time the world got to see. Obviously, it's not the first time, but the first time the world got to see a strict wrestler versus a strict jiu-jitsu guy. And the wrestler had 100 pounds of weight advantage over the jiu-jitsu man. And it lasted a long time, but eventually Royce Gracie triangled Dan Severn. And I think it's a very good example. And one of the problems that people have is they keep looking at today's MMA fighters that have wrestling experience, which is a very different thing. See, when you take a wrestler who's already really good and then you teach him jiu-jitsu, he becomes that much better because he now has the weapons. Jiu-jitsu has the finishes, the submission holds, and wrestling basically is just a great vehicle to get the fight to the ground. As well, it's also just a great way to keep your balance on top and also hustle and scramble off the bottom. Those are the strengths that wrestling really, really offers. In addition to that, I might add the mental toughness of the training through wrestling, the competition. There's so much competition in wrestling. So great wrestlers always have the right mindset. They know how to deal with the pressure, the grind. All of that gives wrestling a huge advantage. But one of the biggest deficiencies of wrestling, besides the not knowing how to strike, if you're just a straight up wrestler, is the submission problem. In the sport of wrestling, there are no submissions. There are moves that cause pain, but none of those moves are designed in the wrestling sense to injure or hurt your opponent. They're basically designed to cause enough pressure and pain to turn your opponent over to his back and pin him for a length of time, depending on the style. So, yes, there are takedowns that can injure someone. Yes, a wrestler Even an untrained wrestler in striking can take someone down and ground and pound him, just like Dan Severn did in the beginning. But again, if all is equal and the wrestler is facing a jiu-jitsu guy who has been training for 10 years, he's going to be very well versed at finishes on the ground. And a wrestler is most likely going to be able to take him to the ground and basically fall into the trap. Doesn't matter how good a wrestler they are, every time they walk into a jiu-jitsu gym, if it is truly their first time, I have never, ever witnessed, I don't care how good a wrestler they are, if you have a comparable jiu-jitsu man on the other side of this equation, I have never witnessed a wrestler defeat, and we're talking obviously through straight grappling, defeat a submission artist. The submission artist always will finish the wrestler. Now, that's totally different when you give that wrestler, Chael Sonnen mentioned 6 months of MMA training. It's a totally different story. If you train him in boxing, if you're looking at Don Fry, and he knows how to stand on his feet and do what a lot of people call sprawl and brawl, that's a totally different thing. We are talking about strict wrestler versus strict jiu-jitsu guy. The jiu-jitsu guy is going to win. And does that mean always, always, always? Of course not. If you ran the experiment 100 times, you're going to get a few losses for jiu-jitsu. But overwhelmingly, 9 out of 10, 90 out of 100, you're going to get that jiu-jitsu guy winning that fight, even if there's strikes involved. Jiu-jitsu basically offers a much more fight, self-defense oriented system of grappling. It's more free. It allows for locking around the head with your hands. Wrestling, a lot of people that don't wrestle don't even know this. In wrestling, you aren't even allowed to lock around someone's head. You must lock around their head and their arm at the same time. Otherwise, it's an illegal headlock. You cannot twist someone's arm behind their back and take it beyond a certain angle in wrestling. In jiu-jitsu, you are always trying to take an arm or a limb past its range of motion. And it's because of that why jiu-jitsu is much, much more powerful in a fight when they are separated. Now, any of you guys that know me, you obviously know that I am a huge proponent of wrestling. I teach a lot of wrestling in my grappling. I teach a lot of jiu-jitsu in my grappling. I merge the two because I think they are and should be married together, along with many other grappling styles like judo. And in sambo, if you will, which is really just another wrestling style. So please don't get me wrong. And I'd like to say, don't get Chael Sonnen wrong. You can not like Chael Sonnen if you want, for whatever reason you have. But when it comes to that video on the subject of strict wrestling versus jiu-jitsu, separated, where they only train in their respective disciplines, it's pretty clear. Now, last thing I can say on this, in no way am I saying that I think jiu-jitsu is all you need. There are a lot of deficiencies in the sport of jiu-jitsu and in the way the art is taught at most academies. And that's why we need wrestling. We cannot abandon it. Having said that, I'd like to point out something else before I go today. Wrestling is a more refined, maybe not refined, wrestling is a more narrow art or sport or discipline than jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is much more open, and I want to make a comparison. wrestling is like boxing, and Jiu-Jitsu is like Muay Thai. And not in every way, but in the same way that Muay Thai allows for more things to, ways to defeat your opponent via knees, elbows, kicks, and even throws, some throws. Boxing is very narrow. It's the art that makes you a master of using just your hands. In a very similar way, everything you do in boxing, you can do it in Muay Thai. But not everything in Muay Thai you can do in boxing. And in the same way, all of your wrestling moves, they all work fine in a jiu-jitsu competition. You can use them, other than in sport competitions that don't allow slams, obviously. That's the one little thing I have to say. But for the most part, in a fight, you can use all of your wrestling techniques, but you can't take all of the jiu-jitsu techniques and fit them into the sport of wrestling, which makes wrestling much more narrow. It has more rules. It has more restrictions. Jiu-jitsu is more free and open. It's basically wrestling to submission instead of wrestling to pin someone on their back. And it's because of that is why Muay Thai is a better overall art for a fight than boxing is. Can boxing win in a fight? Of course it can. Of course it can. But again, if you train for 10 years in boxing and you train for 10 years in Muay Thai, and both of the athletes are, say, twins that weren't allowed to train together, they're basically the same athlete. The kickboxer should win 9 times out of 10, especially if he's taught properly how to use his kicks and not trade punches with a boxer. And it makes you more well-rounded. It's more free and open. And it's obviously not a perfect comparison, but I hope it enlightens some of you guys out there that don't understand it and only see wrestlers doing great in MMA and don't understand that a lot of their success, although their foundation may be wrestling, without their submission knowledge from jiu-jitsu or some other type of submission art form, they would never be able to let or allow or have their wrestling do its job and be successful. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. Chael Sonnen was right on this one. If you want to argue with me, go ahead and comment down below. I'd love to check out your comments and hear what you have to say. Please like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time with more great stuff. Thank you.